I've been a forest ranger for 15 years, and I thought I'd seen everything these woods had to offer. Bears, mountain lions, elk. You name it, I've dealt with it. I've tracked injured animals through snowstorms, rescued lost hikers from cliffs, and spent countless nights alone in the wilderness with nothing but a tent and a radio. I know these mountains like I know my own reflection. Every trail, every stream, every dangerous spot where the ground gives way without warning. This forest is my home, my job, my life. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what happened last October. What I'm about to tell you sounds impossible, and honestly, some days I still can't believe it myself. But it happened, and I'm the only person who knows the full story. It started on a Tuesday morning during my routine patrol. October weather in these mountains is unpredictable. Cold mornings that turn into warm afternoons, then drop back to freezing by evening. That particular morning was perfect. The air was crisp and clean, leaves crunching under my boots with every step, and everything felt absolutely normal. I'd checked the weather report before leaving the station. Clear skies, light winds, no storms on the horizon. Just another day of checking trail conditions, looking for signs of illegal camping, and making sure everything was as it should be. I was about 3 miles into the backcountry, following a ridge trail that offered spectacular views of the valley below when I heard it. A sound that made me stop dead in my tracks. At first, I thought maybe it was wind through the trees, but the air was still. Then it came again, high-pitched, desperate, somewhere between an animal screech and a human cry. The kind of sound that reaches right into your gut and twists. I've heard plenty of animal sounds in my years out here. Elk bugling during mating season, coyotes howling at night. Even a mountain lion scream once, which sounds disturbingly like a woman screaming. But this was different. This was something I couldn't identify. My first instinct was to turn around. 15 years in this job teaches you one thing above all else. Nature takes its course. A rabbit gets caught by a coyote. That's just how it works. You don't interfere. But this sound was different. There was something almost human about it, just a hint, but enough to make my skin crawl. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, debating. Every bit of training told me to walk away. But that sound kept echoing through the trees, more desperate each time. Against my better judgment, I followed it. The undergrowth was thick, branches grabbing at my jacket as I pushed through. This part of the forest rarely sees humans. Too remote, too difficult to access. The trees were old growth, massive trunks that had been standing for centuries. Sunlight barely reached the forest floor. The sound was getting closer, more frantic. Whatever was making it was terrified. I broke through a wall of ferns into a small clearing, and that's when I saw it. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. There was a small figure, maybe 2.5 feet tall, covered head to toe in dark brown fur. It was running on 2 legs, not on all 4s like a bear cub. The movement was all wrong for any animal I knew, too upright, too purposeful. The thing that really got me was what happened next. This creature, whatever it was, looked right at me and ran straight toward me. Not away, toward me. Like it recognized me as help. Like it knew I was different from whatever was chasing it. It crashed into my legs and wrapped its arms around my calf, making these soft, whimpering sounds that broke my heart. That's when I heard the growl. 2 wolves emerged from the tree line on the far side of the clearing. They were big, healthy specimens, probably around 100 pounds each. Their coats were thick and gray, preparing for winter. They stopped when they saw me, evaluating this new element in their hunt. For a moment, we all just stared at each other. The small creature pressed tighter against my leg. I could feel it trembling through my pants, could hear its rapid, frightened breathing. Its small hands gripped my calf so tightly I thought it might leave bruises. The situation hit me all at once. I'd just interrupted a hunt. These wolves had been chasing this thing, had probably been hunting it for who knows how long, tracking it through the forest with that relentless patience that makes wolves such effective predators. And now I was standing between them and their meal. The creature at my feet wasn't giving up its hiding spot. One of its hands, and yeah, I'm calling them hands because that's what they look like, gripped my pants leg with surprising strength. The other hand wrapped around my ankle, holding on like I was the only safe thing in the world. My training kicked in automatically. Don't run from wolves. Never run. That triggers their chase instinct. Don't show fear. They can sense it. Back away slowly, make yourself look big, maintain eye contact, show them you're not prey. I reached down with one hand and gently tried to scoop up the creature. The moment I touched it, really touched it, I felt those hands properly for the first time. Fingers, a thumb, 5 digits arranged just like a human hand. It grabbed onto my jacket with a grip that would put a human toddler to shame, fingers curling into the fabric with desperate strength. I started backing up, keeping my eyes on the wolves. They weren't leaving. They started to circle, one going left, one going right. Their heads were low, ears back. They weren't giving up their prey without a fight. The small creature made a sound in my ear, something between a whimper and a coo. I looked at its face for the first time, and that's when my world tilted. The face looking up at me was somewhere between a human infant and a young ape. Large, dark eyes that held way too much intelligence. The expression was so human it hurt. This thing was scared, and it was looking to me for protection. I couldn't just hand it over to the wolves. I couldn't. The wolves were getting bolder, moving closer. I kept backing up, but I was running out of clearing. Behind me was dense forest, nowhere to go. My hand went to my hip, unsnapping the holster of my service pistol. I didn't want to shoot the wolves. They were just doing what wolves do. But I wasn't about to let them tear apart what felt way too much like a child. The lead wolf lowered its head and took 2 steps forward. That was it. I drew the pistol and fired one shot straight up into the air. The crack echoed through the forest like a thunderclap. Both wolves scattered, disappearing into the brush, but I knew they wouldn't go far. They were out there, and they'd be calling the pack. Then I heard it, howls, multiple ones coming from different directions. The pack was gathering. I had minutes, not hours. I scooped the creature up properly and started moving. Fast. It weighed maybe 25 or 30 pounds, surprisingly heavy for its size. Its arms wrapped around my neck and its legs around my torso like it had done this before. The grip was incredible, strong enough that I didn't have to worry about dropping it. More howls behind us, closer now. The wolves were coordinating. That's the thing about wolf packs. They're smart. They work together, and right now they were working together to get us. I crashed through the undergrowth, trying to remember the layout of this area. There was a river somewhere ahead. I'd crossed it on a previous patrol. If I could get to the river, maybe we had a chance. The terrain wasn't helping. Steep, rocky, full of deadfall. I nearly went down twice, barely catching myself. The creature made these little frightened sounds right in my ear, almost like words, but not quite. Just vocalizations that carried meaning anyway. It was scared. We both were. I heard them crashing through the brush behind us. The wolves weren't being quiet anymore. They knew where we were and they were closing in. Persistence hunters, that's what wolves are. They don't give up. They'll chase prey for hours, days even, until it collapses from exhaustion. My lungs were burning. I'm in good shape. You have to be for this job. But running through this terrain while carrying 30 pounds was taking its toll. I came over a rise, and there it was, the river. running fast and loud from recent rains. The sound of it covered everything else for a moment. Then I looked down. I was on a rocky ridge, maybe 15 feet above the water. The river was moving fast, white water visible in places. This wasn't going to be gentle. I looked back. The wolves were breaking into view, 5 of them now, spread out in a semicircle. They'd cut off any other escape route. I had no choice. I wrapped both arms around the creature, held it tight against my chest, and jumped. For a moment, we were in free fall. I saw the water rushing up to meet us, heard the creature make a sound I'd never heard before. Pure terror. Then we hit. The cold water hit like a physical blow. Everything went numb instantly. My entire body seized up from the shock. The temperature must have been close to freezing. Mountain runoff from the peaks above, ice cold and merciless. The current grabbed us immediately, spinning us around like we weighed nothing. I kicked hard, desperately trying to get our heads above water. My boots felt like anchors, waterlogged and heavy. The creature was panicking, trying to climb up my body, its nails digging into my jacket, my shirt, my skin. I could feel scratches opening up, but the cold numbed any pain. We went under. The world became a churning mess of bubbles and dark water. I couldn't tell which way was up. Everything was spinning. My lungs started to burn. I needed air. The creature's grip tightened somehow, impossibly tight, and I realized it was helping, using me as an anchor, pulling itself closer to stay together. My boots hit a rock on the riverbed, and I used it to push off, launching us back toward the surface with everything I had. We broke through, and I gasped for air. The creature was coughing, sputtering, but still holding on with that iron grip. The current was pulling us downstream fast. I caught a glimpse of the wolves on the shore, pacing, watching. Then we went around a bend, and they disappeared from view. I tried to angle toward the far bank, but the river had other ideas. We bounced off a rock, my shoulder took the hit and went numb and spun around again. I don't know how long we were in the water. Could have been 30 seconds, could have been 5 minutes. Time does weird things when you're fighting for your life. But finally I saw it, a low-hanging branch reaching out over the water. I reached up with one hand, the other still wrapped around the creature, and grabbed it. The branch bent but held. Hand over hand, I pulled us toward the bank. My arms felt like rubber. The creature wasn't helping, just clinging on for dear life. But at least it wasn't fighting me. We reached shallow water, and I half crawled, half dragged us onto the muddy bank. I collapsed. Both of us were soaking wet and shaking from the cold. The creature wouldn't let go. Its face was buried in my jacket, little body pressed against mine. I could feel its heart racing, beating so fast it felt like a hummingbird. We lay there for a while, just breathing, just being alive. When I finally sat up, I got my first proper look at what I'd saved. The creature loosened its grip slightly but didn't let go. Its fur was plastered to its body from the water, making it look even smaller. The face was the most striking thing. Large eyes, dark and intelligent, set in a face that was too human to ignore. The nose was flat, the mouth small. When it made sounds, I could see small white teeth. Its hands were impossible to ignore now. 5 fingers, opposable thumbs, fingernails not claws. They looked almost exactly like human hands, just smaller and covered in fur. The feet were elongated, more like hands than feet, clearly designed for climbing and walking upright. The sounds it made weren't growls or barks, they were soft, almost melodic, like it was trying to communicate. Not language exactly, but something close, something that carried emotion and meaning. I knew what this was. Or at least I knew what people would say it was. I'd heard the stories my whole life, dismissed them like everyone else. Old-timers talking about seeing things in the woods, tracks that didn't match any known animal, sounds that couldn't be explained, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you wanted to call it, and I was holding what could only be an infant version of it. My mind raced through the options. I could bring it in, call it in to the ranger station, contact wildlife services, let the authorities handle it. That was protocol. That was what I was supposed to do. But the moment I thought about it, I knew what would happen. Scientists, media, this little creature would become a specimen. Cages, tests, cameras, a whole life spent being studied and poked and prodded. I looked down at the small face looking up at me. Those eyes held trust. This creature had run to me for help, had clung to me through the river, and now it was looking at me like I was safety, like I was home. I made a decision right there on that muddy riverbank. No one could know. I would find somewhere safe for it, teach it how to survive, and then let it go. It couldn't live with me, but I couldn't turn it in either. There had to be a middle path. The walk back to my truck took over 2 hours. The creature stayed calmer as we moved, though it never completely let go. Its grip on my jacket was constant, like a security blanket. I took back trails, paths I knew were rarely used. We didn't see another soul. When we reached my truck, I faced a new problem. How do you hide something like this? I grabbed a blanket from the back seat and made a little nest in the rear footwell. The creature curled up in it without complaint, like it understood what I was trying to do. I threw my jacket over it for extra concealment. The drive to the ranger station felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every car that passed made my heart jump, but we made it. The parking lot was empty. Shift change had just happened. Perfect timing. I parked far from the main building, checked that the coast was clear, then carefully moved the creature to under my jacket. It stayed perfectly still, like it knew this was important. I logged the end of my patrol on the computer, kept the report brief. Everything normal, no incidents. Then I put in for a week off, family emergency. My supervisor approved it without question. I never take time off, so he didn't even ask what the emergency was. I logged out, walked back to my truck as casually as I could manage, and got out of there. I live alone. Divorced 3 years ago, kids are grown and living their own lives. No one to explain this to. No one who would drop by unexpectedly. If I was going to hide something impossible, my house was the place to do it. I drove home on the back roads, taking the long way to avoid any chance of being seen. Every mile felt like a small victory. Getting the creature inside was nerve-wracking, even though my nearest neighbor is half a mile away. I pulled into the garage, closed the door behind me, and only then did I let it out. It looked around with those big eyes, taking everything in. When I opened the door to the house, it followed close behind, one hand holding onto my pant leg. The first order of business was figuring out what it ate. I set it down on the kitchen floor and started pulling things out of the fridge. Fruit, vegetables, bread, cheese, leftover chicken. I put them all on a plate and set it down. The creature approached cautiously, sniffed each item, then reached for a banana. What happened next stopped me cold. It peeled the banana, not like an animal tearing at food. It peeled it from the stem, pulled the peel back in strips, exactly like a human would. Then it ate the banana carefully, almost delicately. I offered it water in a cup. It took the cup with both hands and drank, tilting the cup back like a toddler learning to drink. Some water spilled on its fur, but most of it made it into its mouth. It made a soft sound, something that felt like appreciation. Over the next hour, I watched it eat strawberries, apple slices, and some carrots. It ignored the meat and bread, apparently vegetarian. That made sense for something that looked part ape. As evening fell, the creature started getting drowsy. It climbed onto my couch, circled a few times like a dog, and curled up into a ball. Within minutes, it was asleep. I sat in my recliner and just watched it, the small chest rising and falling with each breath. the hands curled up under its chin. It looked so vulnerable. 1,000 questions ran through my mind. Where was its family? Was it alone out there? How did it get separated? What happened to its parents? The wolves had been hunting it, maybe for hours, maybe for days. Had something happened to its group? I knew what I had to do. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering supplies. I needed to build a shelter deep in the forest, somewhere remote and safe, somewhere this creature could live and learn to survive on its own. It couldn't stay with me, that wasn't fair to it, but I could give it a fighting chance. I pulled out a notebook and started making a list. Lumber, tarps, rope, tools, dried food, first aid supplies. Everything I'd need to build a basic shelter and keep it provisioned while the creature learned to fend for itself. The list grew longer as I thought of more items. Finally, exhaustion caught up with me. I thought about going to bed, but I couldn't leave the creature alone. What if it woke up scared? What if it needed something? I grabbed a blanket, settled into my recliner, and closed my eyes. Sleep came surprisingly fast. I woke up to something touching my face. The creature was standing next to my chair, one hand on my cheek, making soft, questioning sounds. It was morning. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The creature seemed less afraid now, more curious. It explored the living room while I made breakfast, touching things carefully, looking back at me often as if to make sure I was still there. After we ate, more fruit and vegetables for it, coffee and toast for me, I got ready for a supply run. The creature followed me around the house like a shadow. When I went to the garage and started loading things into the truck, it watched with intense curiosity. Every tool I picked up, it wanted to examine. Every item I loaded, it followed with its eyes. The tricky part was getting it back into hiding for the drive. I'd picked a trailhead I knew well, one that saw maybe 1 or 2 hikers a week this time of year. Too remote for casual visitors, perfect for what I needed. The creature seemed to understand when I wrapped it in the blanket again. It stayed perfectly still under the blanket in the back seat, not making a sound. The trailhead parking lot was empty when we arrived. Perfect. I'd brought a large hiking backpack, the kind people use for multi-day camping trips. I put the creature inside. It fit surprisingly well, curled up at the bottom, and loaded supplies on top and around it. The creature stayed quiet. It seemed to know this was important. The hike in took 3 hours. The trail went 2 miles before it became barely more than an animal path. After that, I was navigating by memory and instinct. Up slopes, through valleys, always heading deeper into the backcountry. The backpack was heavy, but manageable. Every so often, I'd feel the creature shift slightly inside, still quiet, still trusting. I found the spot I was looking for, a small clearing near the base of the mountain surrounded by dense trees. A stream ran nearby, fresh water. The tree cover was thick enough that you couldn't see it from above. Perfect concealment. I set the backpack down and opened it. The creature climbed out, looked around, and immediately started exploring. What happened next amazed me. The creature went straight for the nearest tree and climbed it. Not awkwardly, not slowly. It shot up that trunk like it was born to do it. Within seconds, it was 20 feet up, moving from branch to branch with absolute confidence. It made happy sounds, little hoots and chirps. This was home. This was where it belonged. While it explored, I started working. I'd brought a small folding saw and some basic tools. The shelter would be simple. A frame of logs with a tarp roof and a raised platform to sleep on. Nothing fancy, just something to keep it dry and protected from the elements. I worked until the sun started to set, the creature watching from various perches in the trees. Over the next 3 days, I made multiple trips. Each time, the creature seemed to understand the routine. It would climb into the backpack without complaint, stay quiet during the hike, then explore while I worked. It started helping, actually helping. Bringing me sticks, holding pieces of wood steady while I tied them together. Not random actions, purposeful assistance. By the third day, the shelter was done. It wasn't pretty, but it was solid. The frame was lashed together with rope, the tarp was secured tightly, and the sleeping platform was raised 2 feet off the ground. I'd even built a small food cache high in a nearby tree, protected from bears and other animals. The creature inspected everything, climbing over the shelter, pulling on ropes, testing the platform. It seemed satisfied. The creature never strayed far during those 3 days. It would explore, climb trees, dig in the dirt looking for bugs, but it always kept me in sight. Every so often it would come back, touch my arm or leg, make a soft sound, then go back to exploring, checking in, making sure I was still there. Once the shelter was built, the real work began. I started coming every day after my shift ended. I'd tell people I was hiking to clear my head, dealing with stress. Nobody questioned it. Rangers are supposed to love the outdoors, right? I showed the creature how to dig for roots. There were plenty of edible plants in the area if you knew where to look. I'd dig one up, show it the root, let it taste it. The next time, I'd start digging and it would take over, understanding immediately what I wanted. Its learning speed was frightening. Once was usually enough. It would remember. Teaching it which plants were safe was trickier. I used a simple system. I'd eat something to show it was safe. If I pushed something away and made a negative sound, it learned to avoid that plant. The creature caught on fast. Within days, it was finding edible plants on its own and showing them to me as if to ask, "Is this one okay?" The stream was a gold mine for teaching. I showed it how to catch fish by hand, patience, stillness, then a quick grab. The creature watched for maybe an hour, completely focused. Then it tried, missed the first few times, but adjusted with each attempt. By the end of the day, it had caught 3 small fish. It ate them raw, which didn't surprise me. Fire was interesting. I built a small campfire one evening and the creature was immediately fascinated but also cautious. It understood fire was dangerous but useful. When I cooked fish over it, the creature reached toward the flames and I had to pull its hand back. I held it near the fire, letting it feel the heat, then made a strong negative sound. It understood fire was not for touching. One day I showed it how to build a smaller shelter out of branches and leaves, just a simple lean-to, something it could construct if the main shelter was ever damaged. I built one, then tore it down and gestured for it to try. It started building immediately. The first attempt was messy, unstable, but it looked at my example, adjusted, and tried again. The second attempt was better. By the third try, it had built something better than my original. I was stunned. Teaching it to recognize danger signs was crucial. I showed it bear scat, made aggressive sounds, indicated danger. When we found snake tracks, same thing. I pointed to poison oak, made strong warning sounds, indicated it should avoid it. The creature never made the same mistake twice. Show it once, it remembered. The weeks passed in a rhythm. I'd come after work, spend 3 or 4 hours teaching and watching. The creature was growing more independent. It started wandering further from the shelter, always returning before dark. It was building confidence. One evening, I arrived to find it had built small food caches in multiple trees. Not just one like I'd shown it. Multiple, spreading out its resources. That wasn't something I'd taught. That was the creature thinking ahead, planning, intelligence. By the second month, the creature was comfortable being alone for longer periods. The change was gradual but noticeable. It had gone from clinging to me constantly to exploring independently for hours at a time. I'd arrived to find it already engaged in some activity, fishing in the stream with remarkable patience, foraging for specific plants it had learned were edible, or just sitting in a tree watching the forest like it was reading a book. But it always greeted me when I showed up. Always. A sound, a touch, a look that said, "I'm glad you're here." That greeting never changed, never diminished. It was the one constant in our evolving relationship. One day in particular stands out. I arrived and couldn't find it anywhere. The shelter was empty, sleeping platform undisturbed, no sign of it by the stream where it usually fished. The food caches were untouched. Panic started to creep in, cold and insistent. Had it left? Had something happened? Had another predator found this place? I called out, a sound I'd started using as a greeting, something between a whistle and a hoot. No response. Just the wind in the trees and the distant sound of water over rocks. I searched wider, looking behind trees, checking the usual spots, following tracks that might have been fresh or might have been days old. Nothing. My heart was pounding. All the what-ifs started flooding in. What if it had gotten hurt and couldn't call out? What if the wolves had come back? What if... Then I heard it, a soft sound from directly above. I looked up and there it was, high in a tree, watching me with those intelligent eyes. It had been there the whole time, perfectly still, watching me search. It made a sound that I'd learned meant come here or look at this. I realized it had been watching me search, observing my methods, maybe even learning from them. Or maybe, and this thought made me smile despite my relief, maybe it was even amused by my concern. We'd developed a communication system, not language exactly, but something close. Different sounds meant different things. Water, food, danger, come, stay, stop. The creature had added its own sounds, and I'd learned what they meant through repetition and context. We understood each other. It started responding to simple commands, not like a dog responds to training, but like it understood the intent behind the gesture. Stay here while I check something. Come look at this. Be quiet. The understanding was mutual and real. One afternoon, I cut my hand on a sharp rock while working on some repairs to the shelter. It wasn't serious, just a clean slice across my palm that bled more than it should. I was reaching for my first aid kit when the creature ran over. It disappeared into the woods for a moment, then came back with a specific plant. One I recognized. It had antiseptic properties. The creature pressed the leaves against my cut and held them there. I was stunned. I'd never shown it that plant or its use. How did it know? Was it instinct? Knowledge passed down somehow? Or was it just that smart? Observing that certain plants helped with certain problems? I realized I was learning from it as much as it was learning from me. It showed me which berries were sweetest, which trees attracted bees and their honey, how to move through the forest silently. Something it did naturally, and I had to practice. It knew when weather was going to change hours before I did, would head back to shelter long before the first drops fell. I'd sit with it in the evenings before I had to leave, and we'd just be quiet together. It would lean against me, making soft, contented sounds. Sometimes it would groom my hair, carefully picking through it like primates do. It was soothing, intimate. I'd never felt such a strong connection with any animal before. But this wasn't really an animal, was it? It was something else, something in between. The third month brought changes. The creature started venturing away from the shelter for full days. I'd arrive in the afternoon and it wouldn't be there. I'd learned not to panic. It always came back. Sometimes it would return with food, fruit, or fish, like it was contributing to our shared meals. It was growing too. Noticeably taller, filling out. The baby features of its face were slowly changing, becoming more defined. It was getting stronger, more confident in its movements. I'd watched it leap between trees, covering distances that seemed impossible. It was becoming what it was meant to be. One evening, I arrived to find the shelter significantly improved. The creature had woven additional walls using branches and vines, creating better wind protection. The platform had been reinforced. The tarp had been adjusted to shed water better. All things I'd planned to do eventually, it had done them alone without instruction. When I saw what it had done, the creature made a sound I'd come to understand meant look or see. It was showing me, proud of what it had accomplished. I made approving sounds and it practically glowed with happiness. Still young, still needing approval, but growing up fast. The realization hit me hard one night as I hiked back to my truck. It didn't need me anymore, not really. It could find food, build shelter, avoid danger, survive on its own. That had been the goal from the beginning. Teach it to survive, then let it go. But now that we were approaching that moment, I felt a hollow ache in my chest. I started coming less frequently, not because I wanted to, but because it needed to adapt to being alone. Every few days instead of every day. The creature seemed to understand. It was still happy to see me, still affectionate, but it wasn't desperate for my presence anymore. It had found its independence. I started teaching it about humans more directly. I brought pictures in a waterproof pouch, people, cars, buildings. I made strong warning sounds, danger, avoid. The creature looked at the images with intense focus. When I pointed at myself, then at the pictures, then made the danger sound, it seemed to understand. Humans were to be avoided, all humans, even friendly ones. It had already been avoiding the trails on its own. I'd checked a few times, followed its tracks. It stayed deep in the backcountry, far from any human paths. Smart, always so smart. The questions that had been nagging at me since the beginning got louder as the creature grew more independent. Where was its family? Why had it been alone? I'd been in that forest for 15 years and never seen any sign of others. No tracks, no scat, no broken branches at the heights these creatures would reach. Nothing. I started spending my days off searching the area where I'd first found it, looking for any sign that others like it existed. I found nothing, just normal forest, normal animals. It was like this creature had appeared out of nowhere. Had something happened to its group? Disease could wipe out small populations, so could humans, though I hated to think about it. Maybe they'd been in an area where they encountered hunters or poachers. Maybe this one had escaped, had run, and just kept running until the wolves found it. Sometimes, in the evenings, I'd watch the creature sitting on its favorite rock outcropping. It would look out over the forest and make sounds, soft calls that carried through the trees, waiting for an answer that never came. It broke my heart. I wanted so badly to find others for it, to give it a family, a community, something more than just me visiting a few times a week. But the forest kept its secrets. If there were others out there, they were staying hidden, or they didn't exist. Maybe this one really was alone. I thought about taking it somewhere else. There were reports of sightings in the Pacific Northwest, in parts of Canada, places where these creatures were seen more frequently. Maybe it would have a better chance of finding others there. But I didn't know for sure, and moving it across states or international borders would be impossible without detection. Plus, it had learned this area. This was its territory now. Moving it might do more harm than good. The creature was thriving physically, but I could see the loneliness sometimes. It had me, but I couldn't be there all the time. And I wasn't really its kind, was I? I was just the human who had saved it and taught it how to survive. A guardian maybe, but not family, not really. As summer turned toward fall, I focused on teaching winter survival. The creature needed to know how to handle snow, ice, and freezing temperatures. I showed it how to insulate the shelter with pine boughs and moss, how to create windbreaks, how to find food when the ground was frozen and the streams were iced over. We practiced building temporary shelters in snow. Well, I showed it with dirt and leaves, miming what snow would be like. The creature caught on. It built practice shelters, getting faster and more efficient each time, always improving, always adapting. I showed it caves in the area, places where it could take shelter during severe weather. The creature explored each one thoroughly, memorizing layouts, finding the driest spots. I watched it touch the cave walls, look up at the ceiling, test the stability of rocks, learning the space, making it familiar. We worked on food caching for winter. The creature had been doing this on its own, but now we did it systematically. Multiple caches in multiple locations. Dried fruit, nuts, roots stored in protected spots. Insurance against lean times. The creature understood immediately why we were doing this. Planning ahead came naturally to it. I taught it about ice on streams, how to test it, how to know when it was safe to cross, how to break through if needed. I showed it plants that stayed accessible in winter, roots that could be dug up even in frozen ground, which tree barks were edible in emergencies. There were medicinal plants to learn too. Which ones helped with common injuries or illnesses? The creature had already shown it knew some of these instinctively. I taught it the ones I knew, and it showed me ones I didn't. We learned together. One afternoon, I brought my camera. I wanted a photo, something to remember this by. Something to prove to myself it had all been real. I took the camera out and the creature came over, curious. It looked at the lens, at me, back at the lens. Then I stopped myself. What was I doing? No evidence, no proof. That was the deal I'd made. Keep it secret, keep it safe. I put the camera away. The creature watched, tilted its head like it was asking why. Instead of taking a picture, I just sat and watched, memorizing everything, the way it moved, the sounds it made, the expressions on its face, the way its eyes caught the light. These memories would have to be enough. The area was getting more visitors as fall hiking season picked up. I'd seen fresh boot prints on trails that had been empty all summer. The risk of discovery was growing. It was time to prepare for goodbye. I knew this would be the last time I came to the shelter. 6 months had passed since that day with the wolves. The creature was nearly full grown now, maybe 4 feet tall and still growing. Strong, capable, surviving beautifully. It didn't need me anymore. If anything, my continued presence was a risk. I brought a massive load of preserved food, everything I could carry. I spent the morning setting it all up in the high cache, organizing it, making sure it was secure against weather and animals, enough to last through winter if needed. The creature watched, helping, not knowing this was different. When the work was done, we sat together by a small fire. The creature leaned against me like it had done countless times before. I tried to figure out how to say goodbye to something that didn't speak my language. How do you explain that you're leaving but you don't want to? That it's for the best even though it hurts? I pointed to myself, then to it, then made the gesture we had established for stay. You stay here. Then I pointed to myself and made the gesture for go. I'm leaving. The creature looked at me with those intelligent eyes. It made a questioning sound. Why? I couldn't answer that. Not in a way it would understand. I showed it one more time. Avoid humans, stay hidden, stay safe. The creature nodded. It had heard this before. It understood. But then it touched my hand, a gesture it often made when it wanted reassurance. Was I coming back? We shared a meal together, berries and roots, fish from the stream. We'd done this hundreds of times over the past 6 months. The creature seemed to sense something was different. It stayed closer than usual, touching me more often. When evening started to fall, I knew I had to go. I'd already stayed later than I should have. I stood up and gathered my few tools. The creature climbed into a nearby tree, settling on a branch about 10 feet up. It was watching me. Maybe it knew, maybe it understood better than I thought. I looked up at it one last time, those eyes that had looked at me with such trust 6 months ago. That face that had changed from infant to juvenile. That small being that had become such a huge part of my life. I spoke, even though it couldn't understand the words, had to say something. "You'll be okay." The creature made a soft sound back. Not sad, just acknowledging. Then it settled back against the tree trunk, watching. It wasn't going to come down. Maybe it knew that would make leaving harder. I turned and walked away. Every step felt wrong. Every part of me wanted to turn around, go back, stay one more day. But I kept walking, down the slope, into the trees, toward the trail. I didn't look back. Couldn't look back. If I did, I'd never leave. The 3-hour hike back to my truck was the longest of my life. I kept hearing sounds, thinking maybe it had followed me, but it hadn't. It was staying where it belonged, in the forest, in the wild, free. I sat in my truck for a long time before starting the engine. The rational part of my brain knew I'd done the right thing. I'd given it the skills to survive, a safe place to live, and a fighting chance at life. But the other part, the part that had spent 6 months bonding with this creature, felt like I'd just abandoned a child in the woods. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about it in the shelter, alone. Had I done enough? Would it be okay? What if winter was harder than expected? What if it got hurt with no one to help? The questions circled endlessly. 6 months passed. Winter came and went. I continued my regular patrols, but avoided that whole section of the forest. I didn't trust myself to stay away if I got close. The creature needed to be wild, needed to be forgotten. By me, by everyone. Spring arrived, and with it, my resolve weakened. I told myself I'd just check the shelter area once, just make sure everything was okay. It had been a hard winter, lots of snow. Maybe the shelter had collapsed. Maybe the food cache had been raided. I convinced myself these were legitimate concerns. One day in late fall, during a patrol in a different area, I found tracks, fresh tracks. They were large, too big for a bear. The shape was wrong, elongated feet, 5 clear toes, bipedal stride. My heart started racing. I followed them carefully, staying downwind, moving quietly. All those lessons the creature had taught me about moving silently through the forest. The tracks led to a ridge overlooking a valley. I stopped, crouched behind a boulder, and pulled out my binoculars. It took a minute to spot movement, but then I saw it. A figure moving through the trees far below. Taller now, easily 6 feet. Broader, moving with confidence through the terrain. My creature. All grown up. I watched it hunt, watching it climb, watching it strip bark from a tree to get at the insects underneath. All the things I'd taught it, refined and perfected. It was thriving, surviving, living exactly as it should be. Then I saw something else. Movement in the trees behind it. Another figure, larger, older, an adult. My breath caught. The adult approached slowly, making soft vocalizations. My creature, not mine anymore, never really was, responded. They stood together for a moment, then moved off together into the deeper forest. I kept watching. 2 more appeared, then another, a small group moving together. They weren't alone out here. There were others, a family, a community, something. And my creature was with them. Integrated, accepted, part of the group. Relief flooded through me so strongly I had to sit down. It wasn't alone. It had found its people, or they had found it. Either way, it had what I'd wanted for it all along. Family, community, a future. The group moved deeper into the forest, disappearing into the dense trees. I watched until I couldn't see them anymore. I knew I'd never see it again, and I knew that was exactly how it should be. That was 3 years ago now, 3 years of keeping this secret locked inside. I've kept it the entire time, never told anyone what I found, what I did, what I witnessed. Not my ex-wife when we had dinner last Christmas. Not my kids when they asked why I was retiring early. Not my closest friend and fellow ranger who I've worked with for over a decade. No one. The secret sits in my chest like a stone, heavy and constant, but I carry it willingly because I know what would happen if I spoke. Sometimes other rangers mention strange sounds they've heard during night patrols, calls that don't match any known animal, howls that seem almost like words, footsteps that sound too heavy, too bipedal to be bears. Odd tracks they've found, large humanoid footprints in mud or snow that they can't explain. Each time I feel my heart rate pick up. I stay quiet. I change the subject. I suggest it was probably just a bear standing on its hind legs, or an elk, or maybe just the forest playing tricks. I've gotten good at deflecting, at offering rational explanations that I know aren't true. I know they're out there. A small population hidden deep in the remotest parts of the forest where humans rarely venture. Smart enough to avoid humans, clever enough to erase their own tracks when necessary, intelligent enough to survive despite everything working against them. Strong enough to survive harsh winters, dangerous predators, and the encroachment of civilization. The creature I saved proved all of that. It learned faster than any animal I'd ever seen. It adapted, problem-solved, planned ahead. It wasn't just surviving on instinct. It was thinking, reasoning, understanding. Last year, I announced I'd be retiring early. Some of my colleagues were surprised. I'm only 42, still have plenty of years left in me, still at the peak of my abilities. But I've decided to take what I learned and move somewhere else. Northern Canada, maybe. British Columbia. Or the Pacific Northwest. Washington or Oregon, where the forests are even deeper, even more remote. Somewhere these creatures might still exist in larger numbers, somewhere I might be able to help again if needed, or at least know they're safe and thriving in truly untouched wilderness. Before I left this forest for good, I went back one last time, found the old shelter site. The structure had collapsed, reclaimed by the forest. Moss covered the logs. Vines had grown over everything. Nature had erased all evidence of what I'd built there, like it had never existed. I sat on the same log where I'd shared so many meals with that small creature, remembered everything, the wolves, the river. 6 months of teaching and learning, that final goodbye. Seeing it again, fully grown and with its own kind. I know I'll take the story to my grave. Some secrets need to stay secret, some beings need to stay hidden. The world isn't ready to know they exist. Maybe it never will be. What would happen if people knew? Hunters, scientists, media, these creatures would never be left in peace. So I keep quiet, but I gave that infant a chance at life when it needed it most. I taught it how to survive. And it took those lessons and thrived. That has to be enough. More than enough, actually. Most people never get to experience something like that. A connection with something that shouldn't exist but does. Something rare and precious and completely impossible. I walked back to my truck that day and didn't look back. Never went back. Some stories end with questions unanswered. Some rescues end with letting go. That's the way it has to be. The forest keeps its secrets, and so do I. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that small creature clinging to my leg while wolves circled, the cold river water, teaching it to fish, watching it learn and grow. And I know I made the right choice. I gave it freedom, I gave it life. That matters more than any proof ever could. For more interesting stories, check this out.